Welcome to another episode of Remotely Speaking Up. And this week we are joined by Margaret Manning, industry-leading digital entrepreneur with a focus on technology and innovation. And Margaret is here to talk to us today about the metaverse and managing in the metaverse. I think when we think of metaverse, a lot of the times we think virtual reality. And when we're talking about managing, now we're wondering, are we overstepping our boundaries trying to manage in the metaverse? But Margaret is going to tell us a little bit more about what we're talking about and why we should care about this, why this is an important topic for now and for work today. So welcome, Margaret, and tell us a bit more about yourself.
As well as being an entrepreneur, I'm also a geek. I love technology. I started with technology in way back when there was one computer on a campus and everyone was on remote terminals, writing code into the middle of the night, and also, and this is what really important, playing computer games. That was back in the day when there was just a blank screen with go right or left, R or L. But I got very into computer games then, and we'll see how that kind of integrates with what the metaverse is today.
You reminded me of my Pac-Man days. And I remember the orange guns and looking forward to just getting together at people's houses just to play these games with the guns.
Exactly. Well, in many respects, that's where the metaverse is coming from. That's one of the most powerful drivers of the metaverse.
So tell us, let's take a step back. Tell us what you mean by the metaverse, because of course, this is such a popular term now, especially since Mark Zuckerberg has changed the name of Facebook to Meta. This topic has been everywhere. So just for our viewers, how do you define the metaverse?
It's a really good question. So one step backwards, Neil Stephenson wrote a book called Snow Crash in 1992. That's where the term actually originally came from. He was not so polite about Facebook's change to the metaverse and what Facebook defines the metaverse as. So the way that I look at it is at the moment it's a massively elastic term. The metaverse is basically anywhere where you can have a completely, wholly digital reality. So that covers such things, for example, as Second Life, which is, or Fortnite. Games that exist today where you can have a completely digital reality. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows who you are in real life. You purely are your digital being. A place where you can explore, where you can play, where you can meet people, where you can contact and interact with other digital beings. And there isn't one metaverse, and I think that's part of the confusion that everybody has. There may never be one metaverse. There are obviously there's Facebook's idea of the metaverse. There's Decentraland, which is one of the most popular current incarnations of the metaverse. And then I'm going to say Second Life. Or Fortnite, another incarnation of a metaverse. So in actual fact, there are many of them. Why should we care, and also why now? I think the why now is really important. The internet, way back when, was always a place that was going to create more and more and more virtual realities. So the first incarnation of the internet was actually chat rooms. Then it became the World Wide Web. From the World Wide Web, we went into social media, where Web 2.0. Now we've got the combination, I think, of blockchain, crypto, and higher internet speeds allowing more interaction online. Those three things have kind of come together at this moment in time, which makes the concept of the metaverse, where you can be a wholly digital person owning wholly digital assets, digital clothes, Some of these businesses that have started up on the metaverse, they're metaverse native, and for example, metaverse native trainers are worth more than Nike.
Wow.
On so yes, we should care. Is it a commercial reality today? Well, again, go back to the early days of the internet. We're around about 2000, 2001, teetering on the edge of the dot-com crash after the dot-com boom. But will it happen? Yes, of course it will. It is an inevitability.
Yeah.
So the kind of stories of spending 2 or 3 hours plus a day in whatever digital reality we are in will definitely happen.
Thanks, Margaret. That was really, I think that's one of the most clear explanations I've heard of the metaverse. So thank you so much for that. And one of the things that really jumps out at me as well is it's like the real world kind of meeting the gaming world, almost like you're bringing the gaming world fully to life. It's actually being perceived that this kind of parallel world where people can fully exist and operate in as well.
I think the gaming world has been using the metaverse, in that the gaming world for many years has had games where you play as teams.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. It's like these are not places where you go to be. Most people don't go to be on their own. You go to meet people, you go to interact with people, you go to explore. And the gaming world has had places for a long time where you manage as a team to do things together. And I think that's why I think that the gaming world, for example, in terms of HR and management techniques, has got a lot to teach those companies who are getting ready to take their first step in the water.
Absolutely. So how has it affected your business? Because I think you've been way ahead of everybody when it comes to the metaverse and when it comes to this sort of digital innovation. So how has it affected you?
So it's really important to kind of say what my business is. So I actually help businesses and governments and government organisations and not-for-profits to effectively use these digital technologies, because they can be extremely scary. They can be, they've got two things when you're working on the edge of technology in new areas. A, they're very scary, but B, there's not a lot of knowledge around about how they actually work. So just when organizations got used to building websites, then they had to build e-commerce sites. And then from e-commerce sites, all of a sudden, they realized that they were actually content creators. They were media owners. And the changes in organizations is not just about the technology. And I think this is where I come in. It's about how business works. So business has to get faster, and business has to really understand how it changes everything within a business if you are going to go virtual. So oftentimes a business will, or government or not-for-profits will think it's technology and marketing. It's not. It's about finance. It's about procurement. It's about HR. It's about recruitment. All those things need to come into alignment to actually make full use of these new technologies. So that's why I love the questions about the metaverse and HR are really, really, really important. So how is it changing what I'm doing? It goes back again to the early days of the internet. A lot of it's about education, helping organizations educate themselves so that they know whether to take the step now or whether to wait. And if the step is going to be taken, how big is that step going to be? Quite often a business will come to me and say, right, I want to do a 5-year plan about the metaverse. It's like, maybe it's
not going to work.
But they still do. Honestly, they still do. Let's work on a 5-week plan.
Yeah.
That might be that might be better.
In many ways that 5-year plan kind of give people the assurance. I think it feels like a sense of security, although that's no longer the world we operate in.
Well, that's exactly right, Rochelle. You can't do a 5-year plan for recruitment, for example, because the whole world changes
Yeah.
when you don't know what technologies are going to be are going to arise tomorrow, and it
Yeah.
is that fast.
Yeah. It's like trying to do a 5-year plan based on crypto.
Yeah,
It's not going to
yes,
happen.
that literally is a 5-minute plan at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. I like that though. I like because I haven't heard many people speaking about managing teams in the metaverse, because I think in many ways we haven't quite separated the metaverse from just remote working, virtual reality, being online. And we haven't then seen a need to manage differently within the metaverse. But what do you think are some of the key implications for people management? You just mentioned HR. What are some of the key implications for people management when it comes to the metaverse and doing business?
Um, in it's a continuum. So
Hmm.
if you think about managing people in a single office, then you think about managing people in multiple offices. Then take that continuum, multiple offices across various continents
Hmm.
at a distance. Each step of that journey creates different management techniques.
Hmm.
Let's look at remote working, which is the next step. Remote working has been a huge change. We might all be sitting here used to using Zoom and Teams today.
Yeah.
2 years ago, we were not. So we have attempted to create a virtual office with Teams uh, and Zoom.
Hmm.
We've tried to make it as much like real life as possible. And when you looked at Zuckerberg's introduction to the metaverse, what he did was he tried to make it like a boardroom with us all sitting around it with our own avatars,
Hmm.
kind of looking like us or kind of looking like strange elephants, whatever it was. To me, it was just laughable, quite frankly. Sorry,
Yeah.
Zuck. But
Yes.
but it was it didn't actually take that next step.
Hmm.
So again, I'm going to go back to the world of games because world of games is, to my knowledge, the only place where teams are actually created and managed wholly digitally. So in the world of all you are is an avatar. I could hire somebody. I would never know their name. I would never know their location unless they wish to give it to me. I wouldn't know their gender,
Hmm.
their age, their height. So all of the things that we use in our day-to-day management suddenly kind of vanish. So I'm going to go back to the world of gaming, which is, as far as I know, the only place where teams have been wholly recruited um, digitally and wholly managed digitally. Uh, I've been managing digital teams of up to 200 people in some of the games that I play. And you don't know who these people are. You don't know their real names. You don't know their location. You don't know their gender. You don't know their age.
Hmm.
And therefore, all the management techniques that we have kind of need to be completely rethought.
Yeah.
So much of how we manage is non-verbal communication, which is why we've clung on to Zoom.
Yeah.
And in a place where that non-verbal communication goes, where you are actually managing across a huge variety of cultures. So my morning was actually talking to somebody in China. This is literally true. Someone in China, somebody in the US, and somebody in Czech,
Hmm.
all using translators, trying to sort out a management problem. And that is your day-to-day experience. It's tough. It is tough, and you actually have to learn a completely different style.
Mm. I imagine the metaverse would also take some of the concerns away in terms of working in that very global setting with the cultural, well, I guess you have cultural clashes, but now you have them in the form of avatars. So for example, let's say you have those same three people working, but using avatars. So you don't know their name, location, country, background, anything. But
You do,
sorry.
you do know their language.
Yeah, yeah.
Usually, and sometimes even you don't know the language because they're using Google Translate behind the scenes. So you have to guess it by cadence.
Wow.
So you get very attuned to if somebody's language and their cadence doesn't quite match up.
Yeah. So you still
But you
have that cultural management behind the scene.
very strongly, you actually very strongly have that cultural management. There are certain cultures, for example, that I find, I have to readjust the way that I think when I'm actually talking to people from their certain culture, and you can't do that like, oh, that's a bit weird. You have to get over that. You have to be very active in listening. And much more mindful, actually.
Yeah. And what about the other elements of people management when it comes to the teamwork itself?
Well, the teams that I've worked with have usually had either a formal or an informal contract. So you have to have a very clear definition of what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. That's really important. Then the way that management normally works is very much personality driven, more personality driven than if you think about maybe the way that entrepreneurial companies work rather than corporate businesses work.
Yeah.
It's much more that the personality of the leader really does impact the team massively, how the team communicates. And it's also more democratic, much more democratic, and less, the diversity increases as well without anybody actually having to try and focus on diversity. Let's face it, on the metaverse, where you don't really know so much about somebody, all you want is the best teammate that you can get on with. So the whole diversity thing just falls away.
Yeah.
So it is very different. It can be much more intense as well. Very emotionally intense.
In what sense?
You're trying to make things work in what is not a normal human interaction. In a normal human interaction, we're in front of each other. You can look at someone's faces. You can tell if you said something that maybe somebody doesn't like, and you can work out. But if you're actually managing in a wholly digital world, you might say something, they might not see it until tomorrow.
Okay.
You are writing a sentence. At the moment, most interaction is actually written rather than verbal. It will obviously become verbal, but then the translators are going to struggle with that a little bit more. But you're writing, and to try and get nuance across in your writing, it's very hard. Translation becomes very hard, so you have to make your writing very simple. So it is a fascinating area, a fascinating topic, and one that is really not studied, I think, anywhere enough, when we are going to see and are already seeing metaverse native companies and organizations starting to build up, where a lot of good things could happen, like we can employ people from all over the world without them having to leave their homes. We create a gig economy where people can just duck in and duck out. So there's a lot of good things around it, but the actual methods of management, of recruitment, of HR have not been studied well enough.
Yeah, it reminds me of a class I was teaching some years ago where we were talking about teamwork. And one of the quotes that we used was from Jeff Bezos, where he said, the ultimate team size is 6 people. And he usually creates a team that is large enough to share a small pizza and no larger. So we were saying that's the ultimate team size. And
I quite agree with that, with one small proviso. In the businesses that we created teams of up to 16 people. 16 people actually is a number that is kind of the maximum amount of cooks a chef can manage in the kitchen, or it's a Navy SEAL unit. It's a size of team that I think you can actually manage without a spreadsheet. You can manage without memos.
yeah.
So up to 16 people. Uh, so I'm not entirely believing of the 6, but I understand the concept very, very strongly. So if you are managing in the metaverse, I think that that concept breaks down a little bit because the management techniques are so very, very different. You are managing on spreadsheets. You're not managing a set of people that can sit around a pizza. So we are making it up a little bit as we go along. Yeah.
Yeah. So with your 200 teams, then that's then broken down into the smaller teams to make it more manageable.
Not on the metaverse. In the business that I ran in real life, absolutely. I'm very strong proponent. I think that that's absolutely the right thing to do, to have teams of up to 16, say, people, which is what I did. But on the metaverse, no, it's not the same because you're not managing in the same way. The reason you'd have up to 16 people is because the communication is so strong. That's the best kind of amount of people you can have. They can communicate without memos.
Okay, I get you now.
Yeah, you have a set of people that can all work together almost. I love the concept of chefs in the kitchen. That where people dance around each other. They don't have to be told what to do. They
Yeah.
don't have to be told where to go. They actually are just by osmosis understanding where they should go next. But you
Yeah.
can't do that on the metaverse. It
Mm.
just doesn't exist. You do not have that human interaction. So it's completely different, and we are just now trying to make the best use of what we have.
So what can companies do then to prepare for that?
Um, I think that the first thing a company needs to do is to recognize that this isn't going to go away. And the larger organizations are already piling in. Gucci has got virtual stores, and if you go into a virtual Gucci store, the doorman will tell you to go onto the Gucci website, which is a little bit hilarious, but people are already spending millions on the metaverse. But like the early days of the internet, again, I'll hark back to it, a lot of money has been wasted. An awful lot of money has been wasted. Smart organizations are getting involved in a much more agile way. Smart government is also getting involved in a much more agile way, getting on the internet, setting up their embassies. So you have government embassies on the internet.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, on the metaverse. So key thing is to realize, for organizations to realize, it's not going to go away. The second thing to realize is that it's going to create new business models, and those business models haven't yet been identified. Whoever would have thought of Amazon?
That's true.
But start small. Facebook started, as we all know, with Zuck creating a website to give marks to the girls. Who was the hottest girl in town? Great. Anyway.
Crazy.
Yes, exactly.
Crazy at the time, but it evolved into something so much bigger. Yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly. And as as obviously did Amazon, and the business models change. But the only way that you could get to to is to start somewhere, start small, see what happens, and fundamentally rethink the business models, because Gucci selling clothes online, it's
Mhm.
possible. Digital clothes, yeah, it's
Yeah.
very possible.
Wow.
But unless they get on there and actually find out how it's working without spending millions on a Gucci store, because
Mm.
um, another way of kind of looking at it is even today, when an organization thinks about creating a website or an e-commerce platform, it thinks of it in terms of what it knows.
Mm.
I know how a grocery shop works. I know how things are laid out, and I'm going to go online and I'm going to recreate that just as it is in bricks and mortar,
Mhm.
which is obviously
Big miss.
not. Yes, it's obviously a big mistake,
Mhm.
but organizations have corporate think, and
Mm.
corporate think is what is really hard to break down,
Yes.
which is actually why I think that places like HR, recruitment, finance, and procurement are some of the key um,
Mhm.
departments that can help break down that corporate think to enable a corporate to meet new challenges.
And we've seen that, in the last 2 years of when the pandemic was really in the swing of it. That was the biggest issue companies had with digital transformation. It wasn't
Absolutely.
it wasn't even the technology itself. It was the fact that you had this corporate think and these traditional mindsets that just refused to budge. And even now they're kind of going back to the old way, which is a bit of regression in a society and a business context that's constantly moving forward.
Organizations find it extremely hard. I mean, I've seen some very large corporates put a significant amount of money with very significantly large management consultants, and I think we could probably all
Mm.
name them, to do the 5-year transformational plan. At the end of 5 years, what they've got a very new, expensive technology platform, completely reproducing their old methods of working. Great. so, so
Back to square one.
but yeah, it's like a slightly more efficient way of doing exactly what they did before.
Yeah.
Um, but disruption is happening all over the place. Disintermediation is only going to happen faster with the metaverse, and corporate think is where I would advise companies to actually start. If you don't know what agile business is, if you are still working on 3-year budgets,
Yeah.
you're not going to get anywhere very fast.
Mm. Wow. Margaret, you've given us so much to think about in this one episode alone. Just before we go, tell us, what do you think is the number one skill that businesses or anyone who wants to work in the metaverse should be trying to develop?
Oh, I'm not sure there's one skill,
Yeah.
but I think there is one attitude of mind,
Yeah.
and that is to try and always look forward, and not to try and recreate what's happened in the past. So,
Mm.
in a HR world, in the recruitment world, recruiting and teaching the ability to think and to learn is so much more important than recruiting
Mhm.
5 years worth of experience of a technology that's going to die out.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so that ability to learn, but there's a tougher one in that,
Mm.
which is not to be fearful,
Mm.
to have
Easier,
that
easier said than done.
a hugely easier said than done.
Yeah.
To have those kind of mental blocks about things we don't really want to do,
Mhm.
that are too difficult, just to take one step after another step, little baby steps, to not be scared of technology,
Hmm.
not to be scared of the future.
I love that. It's really been useful because I think a lot of companies are not yet thinking about this. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for just giving us the wealth of knowledge, your wealth of knowledge in this area of managing in the metaverse. And just before we wrap up, can you tell us where our audiences can find you if they want to get in touch?
Yes, please do find me on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
and Margaret Margaret-Manning-OBE is my LinkedIn. Please do say hi. I have a stack of very useful links because I'm learning on a day-to-day basis about the metaverse. So I've got a stack of very useful links if anyone would like to have a look and to explore in a little bit more depth.
Brilliant. So thank you again, Margaret. Thanks for that. And I hope our audiences follow you onto LinkedIn. And if you would like to know more about how to manage remotely or hybridly, or how to prepare your organization for the constantly changing future of work, please go to www.crowdpotential.co.uk. Until our next episode, this is Remotely Speaking Up, and we've had Margaret Manning with us this week. So thank you, Margaret, and bye.
Bye.
Okay.